What about when we look at it from the U.S. Congress and we look at the AIPAC and just how much the Israeli lobby funds the politicians? I mean, I think as we both know, everyone knows it's a money game in Washington, D.C. You need tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to run these campaigns. Is it just, does Israel have us bought out? Are politicians bought out? Do they just hold too much control in Washington, D.C.?
Of course, AIPAC has bought out the Congress, but it's quite interesting, by the way. Well, this is a conflict that goes back 100 years, actually 107 years. The British Empire made a statement that Palestine, after World War I, would become a homeland for the Jewish people. Of course, there was a Palestinian population there that wasn't asked.
Right.
Incidentally, in typical British fashion, the so-called Balfour Declaration was part of a massive duplicity in general, because Britain promised the territory 3 times over. Once as a Jewish homeland, it promised it to the Sharifs of Hejaz, that the Arabs would take over. For those of you who have seen Lawrence of Arabia, that wonderful movie from decades ago, that was that episode. The Arabs were promised, this will be your land. Well, that was duplicitous. And there was a third promise called the Sykes-Picot Treaty, where the British said that the British and
Professor Sachs brings up one of the most incredible facts you'll never hear in legacy media. Our U.S. politicians have sold out our government for pennies on the dollar, and the average U.S. citizen has no control, no say, and no real chance to influence the corruption inside of Washington that simply goes against America's best interests. Once again, you won't find this clip on legacy media, but here is another prominent figure, former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, who also voiced out his concern for the Palestinian people and that Israel's actions must change.
Done to the Palestinians now is horrendous. In their own territory,
Let's begin. Professor Sachs, I want to talk about probably the biggest threat I think is right now is a war in the Middle East. I mean, we've seen roughly 13 months after the brutal attack on Israel, October 7th last year, and this is a very interesting thing because I believe that the United States and Israel really are being isolated on the international stage. We see the United States can just undivided support for Israel no matter what. Biden has given multiple red lines to Netanyahu. I mean, Netanyahu has smashed through every red line and just seemingly doing whatever he wants. We've seen conflicts rise with Iran, Hezbollah.
I just don't understand. These congressmen really set such a low price for selling American foreign policy.
It's a good insight. I mean, that's the best ROI I've ever heard of. Spend a couple hundred million and get trillions back in return. I mean, it shows you the sad state of the political system inside the U.S. and how corrupt that really is. Everyone, Professor Sachs brings up one of the most incredible facts you'll never hear in legacy media. Our U.S. politicians have sold out our government for pennies on the dollar, and the average U.S. citizen has no control, no say, and no real chance to influence the corruption inside of Washington that simply goes against America's best interests. Once again, you won't find this clip on legacy media, but here is another prominent figure, former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, who also voiced out his concern for the Palestinian people and that Israel's actions must change.
Done to the Palestinians now is horrendous. In their own territory by the occupying powers, which is Israel. They've taken away all the basic human rights of the Palestinians.
People in the United States should understand Netanyahu has been probably the main cause of these disastrous wars that the United States has been in for the last 20 years.
This is Jeffrey Sachs, an American economist who has emerged as one of the most rational voices in the United States on global affairs. Professor Sachs isn't afraid to speak the truth about the US government's involvement in numerous conflicts around the world. And in today's video, I sit down with the professor to talk about Israel's war in Gaza. We are now 13 months removed from the brutal October 7th attacks against Israel.
Playing Netanyahu's game. It's time to stop. This is no favor to American security. It's not even favor to Israel's security, for heaven's sake. Absolutely. Israel's getting more and more at fundamental risk. It's completely isolated internationally. It may well be decided by the International Court of Justice sometime soon that it's actually committing genocide, because that's the case that is now before it, brought by South Africa. That would be completely shocking. Of course, has been enunciated dozens of times in the United Nations. And after the Six-Day War, where Israel captured the remaining Palestinian land, it was immediately voted by the UN Security Council in UN Resolution 242 that that was occupied territory that must revert out of Israel's hands.
Right.
And the idea that there would be a Palestinian state on the borders of 1967, technically on the borders of the 4th of June 1967, became a cornerstone of international law.
Professor Sachs, how do you look at Israel's goal to eliminate Hamas? You know, they've said that that's Netanyahu's goal. We're going to destroy them. We're going to completely eliminate them. We're 13 months into that stated goal. How is it as of today, November 2024? Is that a completely unrealistic goal?
Well, it's completely unachievable, but note, if the statement were we're going to eliminate Hamas and then have a Palestinian state, well, then you could say there's a political solution to this. But that's not what Israel's saying. Israel's saying we're going to eliminate Hamas and never have a Palestinian state. That's the trick. They focus on Hamas, but they don't focus on the fact that they're blocking any path to peace.